Hey, everybody, welcome to the Wheels Off podcast behind the clipboard. This is my first crossover one with one of the gentlemen who runs two different sims. I'm sorry about that I'm involved in that involves the world of fake sports, like we say here in the Simulation Football League and in the Sim FBA. Real people talking fake sports. I have Mr. Cameron Irvine, who's in charge of the Simulation Football League and the UFL now. So, Cameron, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Keith, and thanks for working with my inability to get up before the sun.
I understand. So, first time somebody's walking in here, seeing this podcast, who are you? More importantly, what is it that you do, and why do you do it?
Well, I am a Texas kid, born and raised. I was a city kid for a while, married a country girl, but I was in sports my whole life. I was obsessed with football. My first Super Bowl was the Broncos and the Falcons. And I remember it fondly. I know it was on Fox because I remember the scoreboard and little stuff like that, right? I just loved it, and I've never worked a job not in sports. At 16, I was hired to cover Texas high school football for the San Antonio Express News. So I was in it from the beginning, and then bounced around all levels. I did high school stuff, collegiate stuff, professional stuff in sports media, and then COVID forced me to take the leap and try to do this full time. I didn't go to business school, so it wasn't natural to me to think, oh, I could be an entrepreneur and run my own company. Yeah, it was kind of the push I needed, and I've been doing it ever since. So now no one in the sports world even remembers who I am, but hopefully I remember here for quite a long time, and I don't have to go back out in that big wide world of sports. So yeah, it's been fun. I do it, Keith, because I got tired of playing other people with a controller that just wanted to beat the game, and just didn't have respect for sport. I'm trying to replicate the sport. That's everything I'm trying to do. Every reason that I do something is in the name of replicating the sport. I don't care who wins. I don't care if the game is a blowout or if the game is close or anything. As long as it's a replication of the sport, that's all that matters. And I figured, well, I have a higher percentage chance of doing that if the people have less control. And that has been true over time, but it does quite amaze me, Keith, how much people are willing to try to win and not replicate the sport, right, in doing so. And so that's the toughest part of my job is trying to get people to understand my vision and why my vision is important and valuable to the overall product, and why they should stick around and do it that way. So that's me in a nutshell. I just love the game. I never played football. I was a basketball athlete, didn't have a football type body. At least I didn't think so. Well, I didn't want to get hit either.
Right.
So yeah, I've always loved it from afar, and it's been my whole life. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah. So you say basically creating a game that's in your mind close to what you see the sport as, having worked in it, replicating it. That's kind of your mission with not only the Simulation Football League, but now with the UFL as well, correct?
Yeah, it's all basically in that. It's all about that, right? And with the UFL, it's kind of taking some of the lessons that we've learned over the last 5 years or so, even 12 years, going back to the original SFL, and understanding, maybe what works and what doesn't. There are some things that work really well in the SFL that we just aren't in a position to implement yet because we're a brand new league. You can't implement those things until you have hundreds and hundreds of people. If you only have 100 or so people, you have to start somewhere else. But fortunately, I remember all those days of 8 people watching the SFL and no one really caring. And so it's kind of going back in time and seeing a version of yourself and telling yourself, hey, you should do this, right? Like if you had to go back and do it again, hey, maybe we should do this instead of what we did here because we know how that ends. So let's go down another path and see how that ends, right? So, but all in the effort to build the best football product, replication possible.
So having two, I guess from the outside, somebody looking at this go, hey, what's the difference between the two? And why is the same guy doing the same thing twice? Honestly, obviously you can look at it from a marketing standpoint, which I understand. You can look at it from an income standpoint, because I believe UFL is Discord subscription versus buying an outside third-party source to handle your subscription. So there's probably some business, acumen there that has to play in. What it really is the big difference between SFL and UFL? Obviously, a lot of us are in both. We can kind of figure out, but for somebody who's looking at this, look at Cameron Irvine's got these two companies that look almost identical. How would you describe that to somebody else?
I would describe it in two ways, Keith. The first way I would describe it is it's different to be different. And the reason I say that is that over, 12 years of SFL, you can never make every customer happy. It's never going to happen. And that fan suggestion box builds up with suggestions, right? And because you can't make everybody happy, you get suggestions and you say, well, that's all well and good, but that's just not how it works here, right? And so one of the reasons we built the UFL is to simply be different. We wanted to create a product where we were tactically different than the SFL, so that people that didn't necessarily like something about the SFL could maybe something like something about the UFL. When I first started the SFL, no one was doing this. Like there were some tech sims out there that I didn't necessarily know about, right? That had been going for, 20 plus years and everybody's having a good time, but nobody's broadcasting virtual, like video game sports and putting commentary behind it. It just wasn't happening. Well, 12 years later, technology's gotten better, right? Live streaming has become more accessible. People have better systems and computers that can run different things. And COVID forced a lot of other people home too, right? So I understand that there is a larger market of this going on. So I understand that even though many of those leagues don't operate as a business or have a business vision behind it, there are still people that may find, other products attractive. And so having just one product and having to fit every customer in one box is impossible. And I would rather people stick around our channel and our systems and our professionalism by giving them something different to offer than going somewhere else where maybe they could have gotten the thing that I'm, now offering. So that's kind of the first component, right? We just want to do different things just simply to be different. Player progression in the SFL works awesome, but I don't want to create the same product. I want to create a different product, right? So we do things a little differently. Right. That's just one example. The second reason, or the second big difference, is I never thought in a million years that I would have an opportunity to make a game better by focusing on, the coding aspect of the actual, physical game. Our games were console based. You didn't have the systems that were designed and created to mod the title. And situationally, people get really frustrated with the SFL product, and I'm sure any other product out there, any other game that any other league uses has this problem where if you are not giving the person control over timeouts and throwing to the sideline and running up to spike a ball, or when you kick a field goal, when you go for it, things like that, when you're not giving those people control, they will naturally sit at home and say out loud what they want to see happen. And when it doesn't happen, they think to themselves, if only I could have controlled this, it would have gone better. And ultimately that hurts the SFL um, uh, sort of company definition of it's better this way, right? It's a better replication of football for you not to have control. Well, in those specific moments, that's not necessarily the case. And sometimes the game out of the box makes it very, very frustrating to stand behind because it's not my product, right? It's not my game. It's not the game that I
Hmm.
built. And so, you guys over there um, say it again, Keith, the acronym
Sim FBA.
Sim FBA. Yeah. I was going to say SFBA, but I knew that wasn't right. So, you guys, by coding and programming things, I'm sure this is a topic of conversation quite often about how to, get the game to do the right things in the right moments. And so,
Hmm.
with the UFL, when obviously getting to work with a business partner is really nice. I guess you could add that in as a third big difference because the SFL is I'm just kind of out there with a bunch of
Right.
super fans and team owners and players and all that, and that's great. But having a business partner in CJ's is really a lift off my shoulders to let me know I'm not alone. But aside from that, being able to um, uh, tactically change and adjust the game to just make it better. Madden and these other games are not built for our community. We are a minority in the video game playing community, which is why in the hell would you not play it, right? So
Right.
so games are not being built and designed with us in mind. So along the way, we tried to buy Maximum Football. And that's a whole story that we can get into because it's pretty fascinating with Doug Flutie's agent and all that stuff. But
Right.
we tried to buy Maximum Football with the intention of maybe we could finally get a game that we could adjust to fix these situational things. I had conversations with the new ownership of Maximum Football and talked about how, look, we got a lot of people here that can help simply test your AI. This is a
Hmm.
replayability issue. You want to make sure that when people pick up your game, that the computer that they're playing is smart, especially in today's world of AI. I mean, people are not as accepting of dumb AI anymore because they've seen all the amazing things that it can do. So we had a lot of conversations along the way, but then, we finally came to this opportunity and being able to adjust things. And Keith, if you're a part of our gameplay tuning discussions in UFL, I mean, I break down code and I talk about like this is why the game kicked a field goal with 11 seconds to go with one timeout, and this is how we're going to fix it. Right? This is a line
Right.
of code, and this is how we're going to fix it. So we're not necessarily out here to say that Madden is a terrible product or anything. It's just not a product built for this. We have the
Right.
ability to build a product built for this. And that is very exciting. We don't have that opportunity in the SFL, but that's something big here that we're going to be able to hang our hat on and really create the best replication of football ever.
Right. Well, looking at the models and just being part of these, and I found SFL because I'm part of the Sim FBA, and the pace there is a lot different. They're still building a lot of stuff. We're tweaking between seasons. There's one guy who does most of the back end stuff, who's the owner. There's one guy who does the interface, the front end side, and there's others that take different aspects. And it can get overwhelming because they have a life as well. It's not a paid league, it's
Right.
free. So they're doing this as a labor of love.
I remember that.
Yeah, and they understand, and we love it. And it's like, yeah, I understand as a coach who spent 25 years on the high school sideline, coached basketball, coached baseball, coached my kids through every sport, swim, soccer, you name it. Field hockey, if they would have had it, I would have been out there because, yeah, I do want to be involved. The question is we look at UFL, you took away ownership of teams compared to SFL, which is obviously based off the NFL model, even though they're totally different teams. Unlike other sims that will use team names and locations that are legitimate to that sport. What was the impetus behind taking owners out of one game and just going player only with the UFL? Where on the SFL, you have ownership, even though the focus now has switched to player agency in that league. So how is that really any different?
Yeah, I think we looked at the customer experience,
Hmm.
and we look at the SFL and we say, look, this is really imbalanced. And we really don't have a lot of control over how, forgive my dog, um, but we really don't have control over how the customer's experience is playing out around here because the league is so large. You know, back in the day when we had 150 people, I knew everybody, right?
Hmm.
I had talked to everybody. I knew everybody. I kind of had their ear. So if they needed something, if there was a problem, they knew me, right?
Right.
But over time, and as the league got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, people naturally found me to be either uh, scary to approach or unapproachable or too busy to approach. Didn't want to bother me, right? I get that a lot. Like, oh, I know you're busy. I didn't want to take up your time. No, I still care about you. You know, you're still a customer to me. I would love to get to know you. But they naturally gravitate towards these staffs. I mean, these teams are amazing. They've built up this sort of chain of command where, if you're recruited by a general manager, that's who you go to when you have questions. Because that's the
Hmm.
person that you've talked to the most. And then when the general manager doesn't answer you, you might go to the head coach of the team, or you might go to the owner, or I mean, there's a long line of people before you're like, okay, I got to talk to Cam, right? And so
Right.
when that happens, it can happen really good, and it can also happen really poorly, because
Right.
it's all up to team ownership. And so you have a situation where I'll just use, Minnesota, for example. Axel Raven over there is an incredible owner. He has an incredible staff. They haven't won a championship, but they obviously are a very strong organization. Every year, they retain almost all their team, and they're very smart with the salary cap and coaching and branding and everything they do, right? They
Hmm.
are the model franchise. I mean, he does all of his graphics. He did all of his logos. I mean, they do it all. They don't need hardly any help from me, right?
Right.
And they're incredible. And we want the customer experience uh, in Minnesota to be the customer experience across all of our teams. But when you have an ownership model, just like the NFL, right? All the players want to be treated like they are treated in, in Baltimore. They want to be treated that way in Arizona. But when you
Hmm.
get the polls from the players where they talk about like what the living conditions are like and what the food is like in the cafeteria and what the weight facilities are like and all that. I mean, you have the Cincinnati Bengals still playing in an outdoor practice facility. They don't even
Right.
have an indoor practice. And all these colleges have these multi-million-dollar indoor practice facilities. And so it just doesn't make any sense. Well, that's the difference, because you have 32 owners and they're all good, okay, better, bad, worse, best, right? And you've got this, there's no standard of care, right? And so we said, okay, we know right off the bat that there are going to be teams in the SFL that are going to engage customers better than the league ever could. And there's going to be teams in the SFL where we actually engage better with them, even though we're running an entire league, right?
Right.
Um, the goal for the SFL is, hopefully, as the commissioner and as the guy running the business, you hope that all 25 teams end up reaching a level, or however many teams we have, reach a level of a high standard of care for customers, and that becomes a priority for them. And you hope that things like team debt and, having losing season after losing season and having poor retention and all that forces people to care about that, right? Because if you want to be
Hmm.
good, you have to be able to make other people care. Um, and I think that in the UFL, we looked at that and said, okay, for better or worse, we are going to attempt to supply a standard of care. no matter what team you go to, you're going to have the same experience. And whatever team you are on, you know that you can always come to me, right? No matter how big it gets, you can always come to me because I'm here for all of you. And it's not about it's not necessarily about uh, what team you landed on is what experience you're having, which from a business standpoint is not good business because
Right.
I can't control what is going on with the customer satisfaction of my customers. I have to rely on other people to do that, and sometimes that's very, very good. Right, we have very, very good owners in the SFL, but sometimes it's very, very,
Mhm.
and it
Well,
can be frustrating.
yeah, it's almost like a franchise. You can have the name McDonald's or Godfather Pizza or whatever, and that individual manager at that location is the experience for those customers.
Right, right. So we don't look at it as we're trying to say that we're better than all team owners because we're not. We're just trying to supply, a balance in
Mhm.
how everyone is treated and how everyone has a voice. Depending upon the team you land on the SFL, your voice could matter for nothing. Your voice will
Right.
always matter the same, no matter where you are on any team in the league. So that's the method behind that madness. It's just trying to again do something different, but also maybe learn from what works and what doesn't. And it's especially important when creating a brand new product that you create that standard so
Mhm.
that you don't have issues before you even start.
Right. So kind of going back to the idea, you said, you have this idea, this thing you're trying to replicate, and you mentioned the idea of not being able to control in other games. Here it is. And like I told you before we started, I run a Discord scraper. I ran through, I don't know how many years of stuff
Yep.
looking for your things. And coming from an analytics background and having been a teacher and that type of stuff, the biggest percentage of questions that came up as it relates to SFL, I didn't do UFL side yet because it's too new.
Yeah.
The SFL side over time, I'm assuming that I want to say this is like over a 40-month period it scraped. I mean, I could let it sit for a week and just gone and
That
gone
would have
and
been
gone, and
amazing.
I would have been crazy. So I did it basically over a couple of days, and what it come up with, the biggest thing that came up, 27% of the time. This was the biggest thing. The next closest thing I think was 21%. Was owners feeling like they didn't have a say anymore. Was kind of the feeling. And I understand working on this MFBA, working in other sims. I've been playing one for almost 20 years called What If Sports Gridiron Dynasty, where that company has been sold, I don't know how many times in
Hmm.
20 years. And there's zero, I mean, Fox Sports took it over for a while. CS Sports took it over for a while. It's under private ownership again. And the developers used to be available like you are, where now it isn't. And the code's 20 years old and nobody knows how to fix it without destroying the game.
That's a shame.
And the idea is coming from a customer service background, my parents were small business owners. I've been a realtor. I work for Frito-Lay now. I've done a lot of different other things business wise. Who really is your customer is the first thing. And the second one is, with your owners also being your customers, how are you balancing that against, especially with the new changes with the SFLM now?
Yeah.
Because I asked Alex the same question. He goes, "Well, that's a Cam question." Well, you guys are connected. I'm sorry, you're connected because it is the same product to us who pay $72 a month, $72 a year, or whatever, to be part of this experience. I mean, how do you balance that between the owners side and the player side? I mean, that's not easy for any business owner,
Yeah.
let alone somebody who's got a brand like that.
You gotta learn and you gotta teach. That's a big
Mhm.
thing, Keith, because it is unbelievably difficult. I always say, like, if anybody wants to get in my business, I say it's about the stupidest way to make money you could possibly think of, because
Mhm.
you're forcing your customer, if everybody won and lost with the same percentage, right? you're forcing your customer to be disappointed 50% of your time and telling them they'll like it. That
Right.
is,
Sounds like the NFL in parody right
yeah,
now.
that is outrageous, right? Like that is not, that is a big swing and risk to say, you're going to like it. But it goes back to that documentary that came out in season 5 where I said, we want it to hurt, and we want it to, we want you to be emotionally invested. If you win every single game, it gets boring. You need to suffer the heartache for the wins to feel sweeter, that, and people say in life, so part of life is living and dying. Like part of life is you experience loss and hurt and pain, and it makes living that much, more valuable and more important when you have a chance to live. So it's along the same lines, right? But when it comes to owners and the 27% of what you scraped, a lot of times when people feel this is a psychological conversation. When people feel disenfranchised, they feel isolated. And when people feel isolated, they feel alone. But there's a difference between being isolated and being alone. Alone means that no one is around. Isolated means that you are by yourself, but you have an opportunity to not be by yourself, right? And a lot of times when people feel isolated or alone, it's the same type of feeling, but there is a there's an accountability with being isolated. Alone, you don't have a choice, right? I'm alone right now. Like I don't have anybody. But when I'm isolated, I can not be isolated. And so a lot of times owners, I think, feel like they don't have a voice, but they don't. I have put the onus on them to come to me, right? Speak to me, talk to me. What is on your mind? What are you upset about? What do you want to talk about? Because at the end of the day, like you said, Keith, at the end of the day, you're my customer. You're paying more than anybody else. Your voice is going to naturally have a sway with me more than any other, individual person. But understand that there are 24 others of you who also have different opinions. In fact, I had a conversation. I just had a meeting a couple nights ago with one of the owners that I haven't talked to in like 4 months. And he asked me point blank, why did you do A, B, and C with new rule changes, right? Why did you do that? Because I don't get it, right?
Right.
And so I explained to him, why I did it. And I said, look, I'm kind of with you. We'll just call him Steve. I don't think I have a Steve. So I said, I agree with you, Steve. I'm kind of on your side of this, but I created the rule not because I create rules that I necessarily agree with, but because I create rules based on all of the opinions that I've fielded with the teams. And the rule that you see in front of you is a compromise of opinions, right? So while I don't necessarily think it is the best rule, I think it's the rule that best replicates what everyone is wanting. So, for example, when it comes down to base playbook discussions, some people some people love that you could do whatever you wanted back in our first season. Some people want one base book. That's it. Build an identity out of one base book. And so the rule that is often presented in front of people is a compromise of all of their ideas. But because nobody sees their exact suggestion, they say, well, Cam doesn't pay attention to me, right? But that's not necessarily the case. What I'm doing is trying to do what owners' meetings failed to do, which is come to that compromise. So many times over the years, we would have, so for people that don't know, we used to have owner meetings. We'd get together every off season. All the owners would get in a call and they would put forth rule suggestions or whatever, and then people would discuss it, and then we'd vote, and et cetera, et cetera. So often people would bring up the same topic and people would draw the same lines in the sand. No one
Right.
was compromising. It was very unproductive. It started arguments. It was forcing people to not want to be in the owner business. And even to this day, people talk about being in ownership as being this horrible controversy where you have
Hmm.
to deal with drama. No, that's not what's happening, right? That's how they remember it because that's what they went through. And those meetings became very unproductive. And I realized then, Keith, that you can't, again, I was never a business person. I didn't have any business experience. So the naivety to think that, oh, well, if they're in the league, then they'll care about the business or they'll care about what the business cares about. That's false, right? At the end of the day, they are paying customers. And so they're going to care about what they care about. It's not their fault. And for me
Right.
to put them in a position where they're supposed to care about something else is not fair, right? And so in learning that and understanding that, you realize that these teams are going to fight for themselves. They're going to fight for what they believe in. And I can use that to help build a better league. I just can't do it when they're all shouting their opinions in the same room.
Hmm.
I can do that when they give their opinions to me in private. And it's sad, Keith, that I can have 25 different hour-long conversations. That takes 25 hours. Owner meetings used to last for 3. But I'm far more productive by having 25 different conversations than I was having one conversation for 3 hours with everybody. And so
Hmm.
the teams that have my ear, that are self-responsible, that do speak their mind, that do come to me, that do ask me questions, that do get answers, that do try to gauge an understanding and do put forth their suggestions, they do have a voice. They do have my ear. I'm just doing the job that they couldn't do on their own. And back then, I used to blame them, but now I understand that it really wasn't their fault. They were put in an impossible position that it was just not conducive to productive business. And so I understand why people feel isolated, but they are not alone. And I certainly still care about everything that they care about and wanting them to be successful.
Right. For those people in the SFL who are seeing this for the first time, don't know me, the reason you guys see me woke up, so I have a second monitor with questions, and I told Cam this before. I put the Discord in there, and Chat GPT created the questions
Amazing.
for Cam, which is like, that's the level of stuff I go to for you guys. So it doesn't always, like some of it's like player evaluation stuff. Obviously you were a coach and a player one time. That doesn't really matter now because we're looking at a higher level. But when you're looking at teams, whether it's for the minor league or for the SFL or even for the UFL, what do you put into evaluating ownership groups or players or even the UFL teams? How do you, what's that process for you?
Well, on the UFL side, I mean, we're just getting going, right? But obviously, CJ owns all his brands, and they're just so darn good that I
Hmm.
told him from the very beginning, I don't want to change anything about what you have going on. You can make this league look exactly how you want it, because my passion is not in the teams themselves. My passion is in running the league, right? And operating the league and creating and replicating that football product, right? That's where my passion is. So I don't care who they are, right? I don't care if it's the Canton Classics or the Sin City Samurai or the Fort Worth Toros or the Jacksonville Kings. I don't care, right? I just want, a functioning football product. So, so with the UFL, what we're aiming to do is we're aiming to help all teams where they need help, right? And it's the same. It's
Right.
the same type of thing as taking those owner meetings and trying to um, give everybody's opinion a voice, right? If one team really needs a big time outside linebacker that's a run stopper, I'm going to go try to find it. And if it's the top priority of the team to keep that offensive linebacker or outside linebacker, well, then I'm not going to try to convince that guy to go over there. Right. I'm just not going to do that. So it's all about balance and all about, trying to make everybody as happy as they possibly can be. In the SFL, obviously, it's much more complicated to figure that stuff out. But I think over time, what we have learned about ownership is there are specific traits that are important to team ownership to make them successful. The easiest one to point a finger at, Keith, is passion/desire. So I'll give you an example. When we went from APF to 2K4, I built Tulsa's stadium, I built Texas Stadium, I built Jacksonville's stadium. Jacksonville had their uniforms designed by Destro. Tulsa had the uniforms designed by Torillo. Vegas had their uniforms, I think, designed by Torillo. Right? None of those teams are here anymore because they didn't. They just didn't care enough. I shouldn't say none of those teams. None of those ownerships are here anymore. Owning teams because they didn't have. They either didn't have the time, or they didn't have the passion, or they didn't have because they didn't build it, right? And I think there's something. There's something about building who you are that matters, right? Because you feel a sense of ownership. What's in the name, right? So teams that are owners but don't necessarily feel like they have a sense of ownership of the team, it never works. It just never works. They have to be so passionate, and that's why when a team comes to me with a brand, I don't necessarily say I don't like that, or I don't agree with that at all, right? Because what the most important thing is that they believe in it, that they love it, that they are going to stand behind it, are going to promote it, are going to be all about it, right? That's why, Ramos Lynn has the Aztecs logo tattooed to his body. That's why Arizona painted their entire office to Arizona colors and to, with Arizona logos. And, these brands mean something to these teams, and those are the best teams. These are these teams that bleed this stuff and have a passion for it are really the best owners. And so I think that, if someone's coming into this without that passion, every person that's come into this with a business first mentality at team ownership has failed.
Right.
Because it's not an opportunity that is built on business. It's an opportunity that's built on passion, and you have to have it. And then the second lesson we've learned is that the majority of people are not great leaders. We took for granted the idea. Well, back in the day, I thought you could train people to be leaders, and I was wrong. You can't. They need to have it on their own. Now they can learn on the job, right? But there has to be something within them that makes them want to lead, and what that, and to understand what that means, right? Leading means that you're putting others before yourself. Leading means that your representation of a brand is more important than your own personal opinion. There's a lot of things that go into that, and some people don't want that. And if they don't want that, they can't be in that position. It just doesn't work. And a lot of people have learned that lesson over time. They're like, so I can say whatever I want as long as I don't own a team. Great. I'd prefer that. Right. And I encourage them to do that. Right. Because at the end of the day, you want every customer to be happy. So, you learn these things about people, but at the same time, you also, it is a league of opportunity. You want to give people an opportunity. And I very rarely say, I don't believe that you, person A, can do this, and I reject this idea, right? there's still the optimist in me that's just like, okay, give it a shot, right? Can't be
Mhm.
any worse than the current situation who doesn't want to be here anymore. So,
Right.
give it a shot. And then you just kind of have to hope that, maybe this will be better, right? Maybe this will be the unit that turns this franchise around. And failed owners are not bad people. It just wasn't the right place for them to be, for them to have the most fun and the most enjoyment, because you gotta get enjoyment out of leading. And sometimes leading is just stressful, right? It's not,
Mhm.
and so if you're not getting joy out of that, you're really going to struggle to find that motivation to pump your brand up, to talk to your players, to do all those things. And again, it's no fault of people that aren't doing as good of a job or have given it up, right? It's just a learning experience. So when I'm looking for the very best people, like an Alex West, for example, he was so passionate about the SFLM. It was the first time in 4.5 years that I could honestly look in the mirror and say to myself, Alex cares more about this than you, right? Like, he cares more about it than I do. And I'm not going to it would be stupid of me as the person running the business to let that opportunity go away. Because when that's very rare, right? 4.5 years,
Right.
I've never been able to look in the mirror and say to myself, this person cares about this more than you. But he did. And that's why I offered him the position, just solely because he cares more. And he's proven since I put him in that position that he cares as much as I thought he cares, right? Because he's doing a lot of things and putting himself in the best position to succeed, technology-wise and leadership-wise and communication-wise, right? He's done a really good job representing himself, representing the company, representing SFLM, all that good stuff. So, it's those type of moments that the light bulb clicks and you realize you got a good one.
Mhm.
And that doesn't happen every day, but when it does happen, it's special and you realize it.
Right. So part of what I'm hearing, and just to kind of follow along with some of the questions I got here, is literally that you have SFL brand, and then you have 25. Actually, if you had an SFLM, upwards of 30 plus different sub brands at the same time that you're trying to balance.
Yeah.
I guess the question that pops in my head is, how much of this are you trying to control the narrative of it versus letting it just naturally flow? I mean, obviously, it's hard to build leaders. I mean, Corey got me, and you've seen what I've done already. I mean, that comes from almost 20 years of being an athletic director and a
Right.
teacher, and then 25 years of coaching. It's like, I have an idea. I understand what a brand is, what it looks like, and literally how to build that culture. I guess the question is how much of this is trying to control the narrative to the vision you have versus communicating the vision that you had? Because it sounded like you did that at the beginning and it wasn't receptive,
Right.
but maybe they weren't ready for that at that time.
Right. Right. So, I think you accept. I tell people this who are struggling with people, right? They're in an argument with someone, or they just don't understand them or whatever. And I say, look, I think it's really healthy. Learn this in therapy, right? Big advocate for therapy, by the way. I think that the mind needs healing too sometimes. But I learned in therapy that you put people in boxes so that you can better your mental state. And it's not to say that you're putting a person in a box that is a negative box. You're putting a person in a box so that you can better function as a person. And so, for example, Keith, if you are talking to a player and that player does not care about the team at all and is all about them, I'm not saying that is better or worse, right? They're a customer. They want to experience things how they want to experience it, right? So if you know that as a general manager, you can either bang your head against the wall in frustration, trying to get this person to convince them that it's team first, right? Or you can put them in a box that frames them properly as who they are, so that when you associate with that person, you know how to approach the conversation, right? Ultimately, you want that person to enjoy their time and to be an asset to the team. So the way you speak to that person is you always frame it to match their perspective, right? So you're going to frame that conversation to make it about them and why this is helpful to them, because you want the best out of that person. If you don't put
Right.
that person in a box, you just end up clashing over and over and over again until you have a disagreement that is so ridiculous that you can't, that the relationship is severed and the opportunity is lost, right? So I think that for the SFL, for a long time, we banged against the door, right? Trying to get people to see it the league's way, right? And I realized over time, look, you have to put these people in a box. You have to understand that their vision is not your vision, and you have to accept that. And you have to be able to get the most out of everyone that's here. And so in order to do that, you have to let things play out a little bit more, and you have to be more hands-on in the places that they need you to be more hands-on, even if they say they need me, right? Because of all the history of owner meetings and all that stuff, right? I mean, I have evidence. I tried to do it one way, it didn't work, so now I have to do it this way because that's how we make it work. It's not like I started as the tyrant that I'm painted, right? I just, when you need help, you need help. But then letting other things go and giving them more freedom to fail and put more guardrails against failure. So, for example, when we used to supplement draft picks, if you needed 9, we gave you 9, right? Because everybody had the exact same roster size. Well, my customers were all going to the teams that had the poorest retention. Didn't really make sense from a business perspective. I want my customers going to where they're going to be taken care of. Why am I sending them to all these places that are constantly needing players? So by removing that guardrail, we allowed people to be successful, but we also allowed them to fail. That created instability, but it also created a better top-end product, if that makes sense, right? The teams at the top were able to succeed in ways they were never allowed to succeed, and the teams at the bottom lost all of the help and support, and it was up to them to make it happen. And once it got to that point, they realized, I don't want to do this because it's too much. I can't handle this all on my own. And now that I'm out of here on my own, I don't want to do this.
Right.
And so on the one hand, people look around the league and they go, oh, there's a lot of ownership changes, right? But on the other hand, I look at it and say, hey, we're getting all the people that don't care enough out, and we're getting people in that care more. And ultimately, we've learned that is usually a good byproduct for stronger teams and stronger organizations. So you learn how to balance control versus letting the narrative play out, right? And you do it, you control in the places that you need to control, and you let it play out in the ways that it needs to play out. Because I would be a hypocrite if I said to teams, you can't tell me how to run my stuff, but I can tell you how to run your stuff. Critical. People don't respond well to that. That's poor leadership. So if I want control of my company, then I need to give them control over the decisions that they make. And I've become much more hands-off about the decisions that they make and the policies and the restrictions and things like that. It used to be, don't create a side server. Don't take my customers out of my server. What do I care if my customers keep coming back to play for your team? You're obviously doing something right. So what do I care? Right? More hands-off. But more hands-on with, look, you can't just put one play in one package in one formation and call it football. It's not going to stand. We're going to fix the rule. In week 5, we're going to put in a new rule. We never used to do that before. But we do it now to protect the business, protect the product. So in the UFL, it's, it's about, it just goes with everything else that I've said. It's about creating that standard baseline, right? We're not going to be the best. We're not going to be the worst, but we are going to provide, that standard level of care. And that's how we approach that. And, and understanding for me that the SFL owners are going to succeed and fail on their own terms. I want to create something that's a little bit more stable, that I know that all these 32 teams are going to be back every single season and I don't have to worry about it. Because worrying about if I'm going to have this team back or who's going to be running it or what brand it's going to be and all that stuff is stressful, very stressful. Trying to make that the Sin City Samurai almost didn't happen. And I had to step in and have basically spent an entire day on the phone to make sure that it happened, right? To make sure that everybody that had worked hard on that team, everybody got what they wanted. Everybody knew and understood their new roles and positions, and that the team would be saved. So I didn't have a bunch of customers that were all of a sudden homeless. So these are the.
Trust me, enough of us probably would have tried to go after them in free agency. They wouldn't have been homeless for long.
Yeah, and that's very true. But yeah, I think it's about the work that people had done up to that point to create an environment and a home for those people, and to what I was looking for as a commissioner is what is there here to save. If all there is to save is people finding new places to play, then they can do that. Is there more than that here to save? Is there a culture? Is there a camaraderie? Is there a desire for the people on the team to continue being on that team? And learning and understanding that in a way that I didn't know before that day, right? But I had to know, because I had to know if there was something to save. There was obviously something there to save. And so that was our goal.
Right. So we're talking about this idea of the SFL and we talked about this on Ashley's show last night. We're talking about the game Dungeons and Dragons, which you said you have zero clue of. Now I've been playing for 42 years, so which is kind of interesting. Is the idea, and we talked a little bit about this, the idea of player agency, versus railroading. And you mentioned the word guardrails. Guardrails is just another way of saying railroading in some ways. And one of the people I brought up is this professional game master. His name is Brandon Lee Mulligan from Dimension 20. He did this 5-episode shot with some of these people from Critical Role and some others. And the way he explained it was the player on the field, the avatar, is trying to win a football game. The human being is at odds with that because we want the experience. A lot of times those are at odds with each other. And he mentioned the idea of water flowing down a hill. You want to put turns and things so it still goes down fast, but you give the experience as much as possible by little turns and turning to the right, little splits or whatever. The idea with this, with the SFLM, you made a change. And I'm going to say you because you are the commissioner of, this is your company. Yep. Alex works with you, of taking the draft, which is a lot of what owners like, is the idea that, with the SimFBA, we like the general manager side of things, which we didn't always have with the other SIMs, and the draft, and turned it into an NCAA recruiting model. Now you have a professional league with an NCAA model. How do you see that working out? Because I know I'm like, okay, it's not going to affect me because you've seen what I'm doing. I'm already working on
Right.
season 25 and 26 right
Right.
now, and we're not even at the draft yet.
Mhm.
So the GMs are listening like, crap, he's working 2 seasons out. Yeah, I'm working 2 seasons out. I have to. That's my job. That's why Corey has me here. So I build that vision. I know where I'm going. You have a model here and you got pushback on that. How do you see that working out? Because that was one of my favorite things was, hey, I'm with Lexington. I came in last 2 weeks of season 7, SFL 7. Marco's like, hey, Jeremy's a good guy. Denver will take care of you. And ACA was all of a sudden talking to me. And now I'm like one of the last picks in the 4th round. I don't care. It's somebody. Of course, I wasn't developed either, but I got those connections. So I know part of the argument was, well, the kids can't pick where they're going. You know what? In NFL, they don't either.
Right.
Unless you're Eli Manning and you throw a fit, or John Elway and throw a fit. 2 players in how many years? That's part of the process. Yeah, you're
Right.
there for a year. You get to kind of learn. And then next year, because it's free agency every year, you would have the chance to go and maybe be exposed to something new.
Yep.
I mean, what was the input? I know Alex is like, hey, let's put this in there. And I support what Alex is saying. I mean, I always agree, but no, I'm going to support the league because I think let's get, like you said, give it a try. But how are you going to balance that idea of now creating, you've got a transfer portal and a free agency. And all of a sudden you just change the ownership experience for 25 teams at the same time.
I love talking about this stuff. It's so much fun. Like, I know it's stressful and like there's
I know you do. And I'm just trying to for me is like, okay, you got 2 different models that actually kind of compete with each other.
Right. It's just
That don't connect. So I'm trying to figure out how the connection goes.
It's so exciting to sort of peel apart, all the layers of it, because it really, I mean, I was here when, we started first season, we had 7 teams and people, I literally had to build, each team had 10 players and I had to build, this is before hexing. I would build the first 10 players. You could create 20 players in the game, right? And then that was it. So I would create the 20 players for that game, and then I would delete those players, and then I would create the next 20 players for the next game. That's how the games had to happen.
Right.
Just outrageous, right? Like, can you imagine me putting the Pittsburgh and Queen City rosters up and then having to tear it all down and then do it for the next game and do that 144 times? It would be insane. So the amount of layers and where we've gotten to as a product is just like, I don't know, it makes me happy that we're even here having this conversation. But I digress. When Alex was here in studio and we were talking about, the future of SFLM and what his identity is and what he'd like to do and some different ideas and some things that are working and some things that aren't working, right? And we're just kind of sitting there as 2 dudes that care, right? And the idea got brought up that, well, what about the draft and what do we do about that and all those kind of things. And I love the draft. The draft's one of my favorite things. I get to announce all the picks. I get to see the energy and the excitement of what's happening, and always gets good viewership. It's a great thing. We've been doing this for 12 years, and sometimes it's okay to try new things. Sometimes you just want to see how it plays out. One of the things that frustrates me about the draft is, again, the draft is only successful as the people that are running the teams. I hated this situation because I would get these DMs, what's not in the scraper, right? I would get these DMs from rookies who say, look, I love this. This is exciting. I get that it's a draft, but I've been talking with this team for 4 weeks and these guys are cool. And this team just messaged me today 4 hours before the draft, basically telling me that they want to take me. I don't even know who they are,
Mhm.
right? And I've built a relationship with these teams, not just this team, but team A, B, C, D, right? They've been talking to me this whole time, and I would love to go to any of these places. And I understand it's a draft, and I can't make the choice, but this team, they didn't care about me all this time, and I want to go there, right? I don't want to spend my money for 6 months being in a place that doesn't care about me. Not necessarily, players don't necessarily get upset that they're going where they didn't want to go. They're going to a place that they don't feel attached to, that they don't feel like the team cares about them. If you're preparing for season 25 and season 26, you're talking to these new players and you're building that relationship with them, because ultimately, if you have the opportunity to draft them, if you have an opportunity to get them on your team, you want to have an established relationship. That's called being a good franchise and a good GM. But that's not happening everywhere. And I hate for the customer that they feel disenfranchised so early. Sometimes people don't even want to leave the minor league because they feel disenfranchised. They've already built a bond with their minor league locker room, with their minor league teams. And so they're like, I don't want to go to some brand new place. People don't like change, right? Like, I want to stay right here, and I want to stay with this team, and I want to stay with these people. And again, it comes down to that idea of you're not going to make everybody happy. Not everybody's going to get what they want. And so after 12 years of draft and seeing all the successes and the failures that come with a draft, Alex and I had this idea of, well, could we even not do a draft? I mean, what does that look like? And the more that we discussed it, the more it was like, you know what? Why don't we try it? It sounds fun. The player gets to narrow down their choices to a top 8. And if you're a team that wants to be in that top 8, that means that you have to care about the customer before they have value, right, to you as a team. And a lot of teams don't talk to a customer until they can do something for them, right? What can you do for me? What's your overall rating? What's your player build? Because if it doesn't match what I'm looking for, I don't care about you, right? And that is not great customer service. So instead, if you want to be a part of these customers' lives, then you need to show that you care about them. And I can't do that for the teams. I can't make the teams care about these people unless you create a system that makes them care about these people. And it goes back to that whole, guardrails of the draft thing. If teams don't care about any of these customers, then they shouldn't get any of them. And the teams that do care about these customers should have an opportunity to, give these customers a place to play. So I don't know if it's going to work. It's a brand new thing. It could fail. The SFL has done things that have failed, and the SFL has done things that are successful. And no matter what, the reaction is always the same. I don't think it's a good idea. Well, I don't know if it's a good idea. You're saying,
Welcome to human nature.
That's right. You can't tell me that something's a bad idea because that's your opinion and you don't know, right? It might be a bad idea. It might not work out exactly how we intended. It might not be as good as the draft. But guess what? If it's not as good as the draft, we can just go back to the draft. There's nothing that prevents us from pivoting. We're not owned by some big conglomerate that's telling us what to do, right? That's giving us, the way. We have the ability to pivot on our own. And if you were to ask all the teams, should we not do a draft? The majority probably would have said we should do a draft. But the majority also would have said we need to have more talent in the draft. And that is an SFL failure, right? How can I expect teams to care about the draft if I'm delivering them subpar talent? It goes back to that box, right? I want them to care, because the league cares. But what am I doing to help make their organization care about the draft? I'm not doing a very good job because I'm not giving them a lot of tools and a lot of energy to be excited. I'm not giving them a 92 overall #1 pick, right? And that's something that Alex, wants to fix, and has been a failure of the new progression system, is that it's not, teams love the draft, but they only love the draft if the draft is giving them something of value. And recently, they don't really feel like the draft is giving them something of value because these players are not as talented yet. Well, if you're invested in the player from the beginning, then you can help make them valuable all on your own, and you don't need me to make them valuable. And so that goes back to that, back to the recruiting thing. So I look at these situations and I think, that's another reason why the UFL was made too. Look, if I expect that in 30 years I'll be 63, okay, assuming that I still love doing this, what technology is, what we're just going to be on the SFL season 50 or whatever, or season 80, and I'm all the same people doing all the same things, and the system's going to be exactly how it's always been because that's how it works out. That's crazy, right? If you've been here for 12 years of your life, you've spent about 20% of your adult life that you're not a vegetable, right? Like, that's a lot. That's a lot of time to devote into something. And I think that being complacent creates stagnation, and stagnation creates boredom, and boredom creates people leaving. And so sometimes you have to shake things up a little bit to help give people a renewed excitement and interest into what's happening. And some people don't like the fact that things change, but they also don't realize how, boring it can get if there is no change, and how that their enthusiasm can wane in that as well. So, it's all a balance. It's very difficult. Anytime I put out a rule change or some kind of announcement, I know already that people aren't going to like it. Right? Not the majority of people, right? You always hope that eventually the majority of people will say this was a positive change, right? But that if there's 700 people, that at least 40 of them are going to be like, that's stupid. It's impossible not to, given how different everyone is. So that some people are going to raise a fuss. That some people, I have owners that still argue with me about things that have been in place for years, and they just don't get it. They just don't get it. And I understand, and you have to have good enough self-worth, which I didn't have years ago, to say, you know what, I'm sorry that you don't understand or that you don't disagree, but it is for the best. And you have to make peace with that as an individual, right? For your mental health. So, I mean, the short of it, I hope it works. I hope people like it, and I hope people enjoy it. And if they don't, then we do something else.
Right. Yeah, because I know the comments I've heard outside of Pittsburgh. The standard thing is, okay, something new. We like the draft because it helps us replicate what we see as real football.
Right.
It's professional football. And all of a sudden now you're bringing in an NCAA recruiting model. Yeah, I know. I've seen in the Discord people say the rich get richer. No, Canton, Baltimore, Florida, Minnesota, they don't have to say we got it. All they say is we got an opening and got 80 people lining up.
And why is that?
Well, and I understand that they build these systems, and there's other people like us. We're building, we have a vision. That's a big thing with us, with Pittsburgh. And I think I've been very adamant about how we do it. And I think you understand the hogs versus them is our mantra. That's it. We don't care who we're playing. It's us. We're building us.
But people have to reflect on why someone wants to be a backup free safety in Minnesota rather than be excuse me, rather than being a starting free safety for them, someone's got to
Right.
self-reflect. Why? Why do they
No,
want
but
you?
as a recruiter, I love it because you go, hey, yeah, yeah, you go sit on Duke and get rings and never play. That's great. You're doing a great thing. Or you can get the same education and the experience of actually playing, and maybe it'll help you in something else. I mean, there's ways. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, it's going to force us as GMs and owners to adapt, which I don't have a problem with. It's just,
yeah, but that's the idea
it's
from a standpoint of, even I don't look at it necessarily as the rich get richer from a wins and losses perspective. The rich get richer
right,
for the people that care about people. And for
right.
someone like Pittsburgh or a Keith Wheeler or a Corey Menor that cares about people, uh, well, this is great for you because this isn't going to change anything in the way you were approaching things now. Instead of getting 2 players in a class, maybe you get 6. Well, that's great for Pittsburgh because now Pittsburgh can go out and build its its organization and its identity into something that can be successful. And ultimately, as a business, those are the teams we want to reward. We don't want to
Hmm.
reward the teams that are not engaging with the customers. This is a
Right.
customer engagement operation, and um, the
I guess not to cut you off
sure.
here, but the customer sounds like it's shifted from the owners to everybody else now. So you have owners putting how much money a year into this, then all of a sudden say, hey, our money isn't as valuable as that person who's doing $6 a month. I mean, yeah, yeah. To me, they're all valuable because
Right.
we're all the same people. But all of a sudden, that idea of why would anybody want to become an owner now?
Well, so the difference is obviously, we've taken more control over the league side of things, but like I said, we've scaled back on the control over the team side of things, right? And
Hmm.
so, um, why would anybody want to become an owner is a question that is answered with because because that is fun, right? It's fun to manage, it's fun to lead, it's fun to be a part of something at the top, and you genuinely enjoy doing it. I get tons of people that say, "I don't want your job because it wouldn't be very
Hmm.
fun for them." I enjoy this. I enjoy, um, you know, seeing everything from the top of the mountain and trying to um, make good with it, right? And use your power wisely. Don't abuse it. Use it wisely, and be the person that everyone needs you to be. They rely on you. They depend on you. It gives me a sense of purpose, right? As a person, but other people, that's not interesting to them. That's not fun for them. So the the margin is slimmer of uh, how ownership appeals to them. But from a league perspective, that's okay because we understand that it's very difficult to be a successful leader. And we don't necessarily want to make it appealing. We don't necessarily want it to have mass appeal, I guess is what I'm saying, Keith, because um, there has to be intention with wanting to be at the top of something. Um, the owners pay $30 a month, and players pay $7. But there's over 600 players in the SFL, and from a business perspective, owner fees make up about 8% of revenue. I mean, that's true. And so, when we looked at starting the UFL model, we said, well, and we're willing to take that 8% loss, right? Because there's no owners, right, paying owner fees and everything. We can make that money up elsewhere. But as someone that's a team owner in this league, um, you have every ability now to build the best team that you could ever build. There's nothing standing in your way. It used to be that you had to have 23 players and that's it. Couldn't have any more, right? That you had to, come in under a cap, and you had to convince players that they should take a cut, and the players got nothing in return. And those conversations were very difficult for owners to have. Can you imagine having to go to a customer and saying, we need to make you a worse player. Please stay. And that was on them. And that's not fair, right? Which is why we created the cut system where when a player takes $500,000 of cuts, they get $500,000 in their bank, right? They get something for it. That softened the blow for owners to try to, help orchestrate their team to a cap. So like there are improvements that we've made to so the feasibility of being an owner and engaging with customers, but we're also intentionally making ownership a little bit more of a pain point. You got to want it like bad, because it's not easy, and we want you to want it bad because that's the only way that you're going to be successful as an owner, right? If you really really want it. So it is tightening the screws a little bit intentionally, because we really need to see who wants it around here. And I think ultimately over the long term, Keith, that is going to create a better league and a better product. Because if your leadership is strong at the top everywhere, you're the best league around, right? You're the best league on this planet. So that's how I look at it, philosophically. And but yeah, it's a great question because
well, I look at the reason I brought it up is because when you're sold, like the other Sims, though, we're owners of teams because of the draft, because of the scouting and stuff. I guess if the owners had more ability to scout players and do different things, would that have still allowed the draft to come in versus, because now when you move to a recruiting model, we're no longer the Sim NFL. We are now the Sim NCAA.
Well, we're the Sim hybrid.
Yeah, and that's kind of a weird place because, like I said, you got two different models that kind of align, but they use different operating. It's like Apple and PC trying to talk back in the 80s. It just didn't happen. Now they do it quite easily, different ways, but it's just like, how do we get there? Because as an owner, you're sold, hey, yeah, you're gonna have this, you got drafts, you got management. All of a sudden, it's like, we're taking that away from you. It's kind of how it.
But we're giving you something else.
You're shifting the model from ownership to a college model, which is slightly different, which doesn't bother me because I know I've coached high school and been around college sports most of my life. I'm okay with that model, and being able to talk and sell doesn't bother me. I'm just trying to think, how is that going to mesh? Because I don't have a problem with the change. I'll adapt anyway. I don't care.
Well, customers have a voice. If they vehemently reject it, well, then it doesn't work, right?
Yeah, it'd be interesting, but when only 8%, but the 8% to put or asked to put a significant amount of time that doesn't show up in money.
Right.
That is, how is that? I guess that's that kind of that balance we're looking at and trying to figure out how that's going to play out, because there's that unknown yet. We haven't done it to see how it's going to play out, and then obviously there's going to be people like, oh yeah, we know how to exploit this already. So you got to, and as a leader, I get it. As a principal, 700 parents, I'm never going to, the perfect paradox does not exist. You can't achieve it. You're not going to be everything to everybody. And I understand that. I'm just trying to figure out how this model is going to play out with an NCAA type mechanism in a pro thing when you're selling people on the idea of the pro.
Well, and a lot of the reasons why people don't like change is because there's the fear of the unknown. I don't know how it's going to happen either. And imagine how scary that is as a business to take that risk, right? I have no idea. People could reject it. They could walk out. Every time I make a change, imagine how scary it was when we moved to 2K4. I was terrified. Right? And then the first season of 2K4, we had more people than we had in APF. And I took a breath, right? It was a sigh of relief, right? Even though that it was scary. And you worry about, I told Deputy Commissioner at the time when we were going to make the move, I said, if we lose 200 people, I just have to accept it, because I can't put these plays in anymore. I can't deal with these depth charts and substitutions for every team anymore. I just can't do it. It is taking me away from creating content, which is what I do as a professional, right? I've been in sports media. I'm a content creator. I can't create any content for this league because I'm on the back end putting in plays
Hmm.
and editing depth charts, things that teams should be doing. It's
Right.
their playbooks, it's their depth charts, it's their substitutions. And that's another part of ownership that they didn't used to have. They didn't used to be able to control their substitutions. Now they can. Now they can. Right? That
Hmm.
you have. Don't listen to the narrative of, oh, we don't have as much control with playbooks as we did with APF. Yes, you do. APF had one playbook DNA. People don't understand that you were exploited for years
Hmm.
because the teams that understood how the DNA worked, they exploited you over and over again. Like you
Right.
got. And now we understand that and know that now that we have 33 different playbook DNAs, right? We understand now how APF used to work and all the flaws that came with it. So yes, teams, in that regard have even gotten more control in that vein. But I was terrified because at the time, and this is how fast technology moves, and it's very frustrating, right? But at the time, emulation of PS2 games was only 8 months old.
Right.
Like it was brand new. And so it was 8 months old when we launched the move to 2K4. But when we first found it, it was like a week old. And it was brought to my attention that people were now able to mod PS2 games. I said,
Right.
really? And I said, okay, well, I need to look into that, right? And so at its time, it was like brand new technology, and now it's just widely accepted. Oh yeah, emulators for PS2 or whatever. But it was a newfound thing, and it was an exciting thing, for us at the time.
Right.
And then I don't know, 10 months later, people were like, hey, we figured out how to mod, these Madden PC games and get into the code and get in all that stuff. And you kind of I sit here at my desk and go, well, shoot, we could have done something even more modern or more new or more this or more that. But people would have had the same reaction if I was like, all right, we're moving from all pro
Right.
to Madden, whatever. And they would have had their pitchforks out. And
Well, you expect that as a leader.
yeah, yeah. So it was,
The mantle of leadership means you're hated.
that's,
Just part
and
of it.
again, you have to have the self-worth and the mental health to understand it's not personal, that they
Yeah.
don't actually
Yeah.
know you as a person. They just don't appreciate your decisions. And that's very, it's tough to deal with, but you just deal with it. But, it's terrifying to take risks and to stick your neck out for something that you're not sure if it's going to work or not. Nobody faces more pressure in that moment than the guy who, it's my business, it's how I'm employed, right? And taking
Hmm.
those chances means that I really have to believe in it in some sort of way, that it's not going to be the colossal failure that everybody fears it is. And knowing, it was the same thing when I launched the UFL. People said people are going to be pissed that you're doing something else. They're going to feel like that you're leaving them, like that you don't care about them anymore, which was that you're going to shut the SFL down, that you want to replace the SFL. These are all the things that people said. And it's terrifying because you have to do the best that you can to speak your truth, but also understand that people are going to twist everything you say or interpret things the way that they want to hear them,
Hmm.
or just simply not gain the knowledge. They miss the announcement. They don't even realize. I bet there's people in the SFL right now that have no idea the UFL even exists. That have no idea
Right.
that the YouTube page is now the Virtual Football Network. Have no idea because they're
Mm.
not driven by those decisions. They just love playing on their team. They just love being with their guys, right?
Right.
And so there are people out there that are like that, and that's okay too. But yeah, it is terrifying to make those decisions, and ultimately, if I'm going to put the type, Mike Daggs can speak to this, Rochelle Colston can speak to this. I'm a pretty hands-off leader. My style is, if I am entrusting you to help me and to do something, just do it. Do it to how you
Mm-hmm.
want to the best of your abilities, to do things in the formats and the ways that you think are best, because I entrust you. Otherwise, I wouldn't put you in this position. I need help, and I think you would be great to help. So help me. I'm not going to tell you how to help me, right? Obviously, I'm going to, help you be successful in your position, but I'm not going to sit here. Otherwise, why wouldn't I just do it then, right? If I'm telling you how to do everything,
Right.
why wouldn't I just do it? And I don't want to do it. That's the reason why I came to you in the first place. I need help, right? So
Right.
with Alex, you're talking about, for the first time in 12 years, the SFL will have another producer. Someone else will do these games. I've done the first 3,500 games. Right? Someone else
Right.
is going to do these games. That was not an easy decision. That's a big responsibility to put on someone. He could totally collapse and fail, and I would look like the biggest dope for entrusting someone to do that. But I don't think he's going to do that. That's why I put him in that position. So when someone like Alex comes to you with passionate ideas, as a leader, I can't necessarily just shoot down everything, right? Just for the sake of, oh, well, I'm scared, right? Like, it's a scary thing to get rid of the draft and implement a new system. But if Alex is put in a position where he is meant to be a leader and meant to put his stamp on things, but he's never allowed to really put his stamp on things, and succeed and fail in his own right, what are we really doing here, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why it was important for me to collaborate with him on the future of the SFLM and how that impacts the SFL, because it's important for Alex to feel like he is contributing, that his ideas are valuable and that they matter, and that I'm gonna help give him some perspective that maybe he doesn't have on why this rule is not good, right? And here's why. And if he has a good argument on the flip side, I'm going to say, okay, yeah, that's a fair point. Okay, sure. I'm just afraid, right? But there's a difference between me being just afraid and me being like, no, dude, this is going to blow up in your face because I've already done it. And this is
Mm-hmm.
how it failed, right? There's a difference. But if I've never done it before and you feel like this can work and this can be exciting, well, then, I'm taking the chance on you, Alex. And so I'm going to believe in you, and I'm going to give you the tools to be successful, and I'm going to make that happen for you, because that's the only way that you're going to make it doing this, being a producer and being in charge of, a branch of the league. It's the only way you're going to make it is if you have that passion for it. And I'm not going to suck away that passion just so that you can do things exactly how I would do them.
Right.
And so, it's those type of conversations that are important and valuable. And I'm nervous for the future, but I'm excited for the future. I'm excited for Alex. I want him to, I'll be there every step of the way that he needs my help. But I also want him to be able to stand on his own 2 feet too, and have that confidence, that I have that confidence in him.
Right. All right. So I got 2 questions, and then I have the traditional question that we do at the end. For those who have never seen my show, I do a question at the end that's kind of unique. So you talked about the virtual football network. Tell us about that, because I'm on podcasting. I do Sims for 2 different Sims. I mean, what was the impetus behind that?
Yeah, I think that when we look at the landscape of, we got college football back, and you've got PCs that are now more powerful than ever before. Gaming is getting to be, I feel like the trend of gaming is coming back around. For a while, it was like people were priced out, right, of a market. Like, I'm not going to spend $500 on a PS5. Like, I don't have that kind of money, right? And so video games are passing me by. I think we're about to enter a period, and you can see it with Maximum Football a little bit. You can see it with college football coming back. I think we're entering a boom of football, where we have not been in a boom of football ever since EA got the exclusive NFL license, and ever since 2K8 flopped. That was a whole marketing nightmare from 2K. Ever since that flop, 2007 to let's call it 2022, right? For 15 years, football gaming was brutal. You just didn't really have a whole lot of options. And we've got more options than we've had in a long time, in 20 years. And when you think about it, that means that if someone is 20 years old, this is the first time that they've really had a lot of football to possibly play. So you have a new generation of people who have more access to more football gaming. You have more people that are going to be creative, entrepreneurial, and create the things like we have created in the past. And ultimately, if I'm going to start a second league and a second product, I'm diversifying my portfolio of offerings. And it doesn't make sense for me to have worked for 12 years to build up everything that the SFL has been, only to then start a second thing and use zero of the momentum that I have built for myself as a company. It just doesn't make any sense. So instead, what I want to do is I want to be a platform where not only, where the SFL lives and where the UFL lives, but where other football operations are taking place. Because at the end of the day, I have more subscribers and more reach than any of those other channels. So if you want more subscribers and you want more reach, it's just using a tool to your advantage, right? We have built, I looked it up the other day. I was blown away by it. And obviously it makes sense because there's so many YouTube channels out there. But you know that having over 8,000 subscribers puts you in the top 2% YouTube channels, because there's a lot of channels out there that never get any traction, that never have anything of value that the public deems valuable. There's a lot of YouTube channels out there that are amazing, that are great, that I watch, right? But the mass populace does not see the value in it. Otherwise, they would be watching. And
well, would you be safe to say the value, or is the fact that just because there's so many channels, they just aren't seen yet?
Yeah, that's right. It's a little bit of both, right? A little bit of both.
Yeah. Because there's I think they said over 100 million channels on YouTube or something like that, or maybe even push 150 million now.
Yeah. And so, people out there who want to start something new, they can either be buried in the hundreds of millions of channels, or they can air their stuff with us and get instant exposure and instant opportunity. And for us, it creates programming that ultimately we can take and expand the network, right? And get it on places like Roku and Fire Stick and places like that. And that stuff costs money, but you also get exposure to your product. And if you constantly have virtual football on, our greatest asset as a league is that the SFL produces 400 games a year. What other channel is creating 800 hours of content a year? There's not many out there, right? We're probably in the top 0.5% in that sort of metric. And so if we have all that content, then we have the ability to ultimately, and I've been trying to, get in this position for years, build that 24/7 network where no matter what time of day, people can turn on a channel and they will see something, right? They will see some sort of virtual football activity. It takes time to build that stuff up, and the UFL comes first, right? We've got the SFL. Now we're trying to build the UFL. Ultimately, we feel like we can build the virtual football network. But I am constantly trying to find ways to appeal to a larger audience. Who wouldn't, And I think that after 12 years of the SFL, we've been on the Twitch front page. We've been on television. We've been featured in Forbes. We've gotten picked up by the YouTube algorithm. We've gotten a lot of views and a lot of subscribers and a lot of traction in the
Right.
marketplace. But ultimately, if you're just offering one thing, you're gonna run out of people that care, right? You're gonna
Right.
reach the ceiling of your audience. So you've got to create a different reason for the audience. And one of the things that people don't realize about our partnership with Zilligan Design and everything he's done is that he has a core following of his design. He has a
Okay.
lot of people that are paying attention to what he's done over time. He has 30,000 followers on Dribble. He has, 6 times the social media followers that the SFL has ever had. And the social media engagement is so much higher because he built a base of casual fans. And that's the thing that
Okay.
the SFL has always struggled to do, is build a base of casual fans. And so we see that as an opportunity to, bring in casual fans of, sports design, and rope them into, our universe, so to speak. It's not going to happen overnight, but you have to introduce people to the product and to the idea that you can be a participant in what you are viewing, which is still, even in 2024, something that is not offered hardly anywhere, especially on TV.
Right.
When you watch TV, you're not expecting for the product to be about you. It is not something that comes naturally to the consumer. We have to continue to, educate the consumer on those opportunities and possibilities. So the Virtual Football Network was a nice way to put a bow on everything we're trying to do, diversify who we are, and to build a true network of, this is our content. This isn't, the SFL doesn't own any of these things. I own all these things. And
Right.
so because of that, it's like, okay, well, I own all of this, so this is all of me. And hopefully we can get other people and other associations and organizations that are professional enough that they want to get involved too. But we're not expecting that to be something that happens right away. We want to build
Right.
our subscriber base. We want to build up, the fandom of both leagues and all of our offerings. And then, airing some college football user controlled on the network as well will help bring in the people that are also playing college football. And that may show them the UFL and the SFL that otherwise they wouldn't have seen, because we weren't playing
Hmm.
college football 25, or we weren't doing, a user controlled type of thing. So that's why we chose not to go simulation football network, because it's just a football channel. It's a virtual football channel. And we
Right.
hope to diversify, our audience and bring exposure to the SFL, to the UFL, to help in bringing in new players and things like that. So we're hoping rising tide lifts all boat in that regard. And then, how could I not? I got a business partner that's a design guy. He did a great job with the
Right.
Virtual Football Network, and that was just a great business decision by me because I didn't have to outsource that. So
Okay.
why wouldn't I?
Okay. Just looking, I just pulled up some YouTube stuff. There's 62 million YouTube creators as of January 2024. So
Mm,
obviously it's bigger from there. So yeah, it's real easy to get missed out of
right.
the 62 million.
Absolutely.
And there's, at the end of 2023, there was 50,000 hours of video per hour at the end of
Mm,
2023 going into YouTube. So yeah, it's a real easy, and that's why it's not so much that people aren't interested. It's just the algorithm is going to push certain
right.
things, especially when you have Mr. Beast with his 260
Oh, yeah.
million subscribers. He's going to show up a little bit more, especially, and with all the AI tracking of
For
what you
sure.
go through on your websites, it's pulling what you see. TikTok's very good about this too, and Instagram, whatever. TikTok's probably more aggressive because they use a very unique programming system. But just the idea that there's at the end of 2023, it says there was over 114 million different channels.
It's a lot. So if we have a way to help gain notoriety for someone who otherwise would be starting at the bottom, then it's a great opportunity for everyone. You know, and
Yeah,
that's not something that we're looking to necessarily make, a bunch of money off of. We're in it for content. We're in it for, building a variety of programming. And then once we build the variety of programming and we're able to offer something that's valuable as a channel, then that's where you start to, to make that money back on that investment.
all right. So is there this is like the last question for me before we do the closing question, but is there anything we missed that you think we should talk about? Yes, everybody, you saw Cameron not have an instant answer to something.
Am I really that quick with things?
You are very quick, and that's what I like, because that means you have a vision. You know what's going on. This one's like, okay, was there anything we may
Well,
have missed?
I tell people, like, you didn't send me these questions. I didn't know these questions
No.
were coming. And I tell Ashley all the time, don't send me those questions. I don't want to know. I don't want to come in here with a prepared answer. I just want to be honest, and say what comes to mind. So, and these have been great questions. So kudos to GPT for, finding some things for you.
Well, I took GPT's basic and like, okay, I was adapted to SFL and UFL, but the idea is, like I did my research. I don't, any guess I do.
For
They're like,
sure.
you did what? Yeah, I scraped the Discord and I went and found everything you ever said.
Yeah, I think, let's see. I think something that maybe we didn't talk about today was the passion I have for creating, for building. I think that when I look back to when we first built the SFL, it was so exciting for me because it was like a brand new world, if that makes sense. People, it kind of goes back to your tagline, right? People love to create a different world than what they're in. Not necessarily because the world they're in is bad, but because it's fun to think about what it could be. We all only have one life, right? Unless you believe in, being reincarnated and all that stuff, which I'm not necessarily denying. I don't really have an opinion on it. Who knows? Maybe that is how it works. I don't know anything, so I don't try to pretend I know anything on that subject. But we only have one life, so I'm never going to know what it's like to be LeBron James. Never. It's not going to happen. It's like it's a 0% chance. Not happening. So if I can create another world where I can pretend to be LeBron James, well, that's fun because now I can make up how awesome it is to be LeBron, and maybe it's not very awesome at all, right? Who knows? So the creation of things is always just so beautiful to me. And I felt like the SFL was in a place where it had been created, if that makes sense. Yes, it's evolving from, as teams change ownership and new franchises come into the fold and we get new people and we get new broadcasters and all that. And that's great, but it's the infrastructure is there. It's been built. The portal's built. The game is built. The mods are built. Et cetera, et cetera. And I felt a sense of peace with the SFL that this is a great product. It's not a perfect product. It has its flaws because of, A, B, C, D, the game or the business model or whatever the case may be. And every model is going to be flawed. It's not going to be perfect, but it feels like we did a good thing and we did a good job and it's built and it's beautiful for everything that it is. When I saw CJ's designs and I asked him, I learned more about it. He started drawing these teams when he was 11 and he has the notebook paper that he drew the stuff on. Still has it. And we've actually been releasing the UFL Evolve series where he shows off his old designs. right, from these old teams and how they've evolved over 20 years. And I thought, that is just awesome. I remember in 5th grade, that we had 5 classes, and the teachers, the way they divided the soccer field, because everyone was, all the kids were always, they could never decide who was going to play, right? And so
Right.
what the teachers did was they said, okay, Howell and Spain are going to play on Monday. Spain and Gustafson are going to play on Tuesday. These are the last names of the teachers. Huggins and Gustafson were going to play on Wednesday, and blah, 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 right? So they created like this schedule. Well, that's great for me because I kept track of every result of every game from every class all season long on the back of my math folder. And people would come to me in the hallway and they'd say, who won yesterday? Right? Because nobody was keeping track.
Right.
But that was something I could create, right? I love creating new things. And so when I saw his history, when I saw his vision, when I saw what he had, and I asked him what he was going to do with it, and he said this was basically the end of the road. I'm in my 30s now, and I'm married, and I don't have any kids. What does that sound like? Me, right? And I feel like I need to move on to the next chapter. I said, look, I'm a professional at not moving on. We should do this, and we should build this. We should create this. You've already done so much of the work. Let me bring it to life. It's what I do. It's what I'm passionate about. And so I got to create again. And, teams get to create new uniforms. Teams get to rebrand. Teams get to do all these things. But it's been a long time since I've gotten to create something. And so there's a lot of passion in, creating something new that I'm now getting to experience really for the first time in my adult life. And it's been a lot of fun going down that road. And it's reignited a passion even for the SFL as well. Because it's just so great that this is my world, right? It's a lot of fun. It doesn't pay a lot. It's long hours and it's very stressful at times and you face a lot of pressure. But it is ultimately a world that I created for myself that I feel like no one in the whole world knows exists. I just sit in this office and I just do my thing. And I think that's amazing. And I'm just so thankful to everyone out there who supports one or both, projects and products, and sees the passion that is put in them and believes in them, because without that, I have nothing, or I just have, doodles on the back of a math folder. You know what I mean? So it's good to create again, and it's good to feel that appreciation for everyone. That renewed energy over, wow, this is all just so beautiful for what it is.
Yeah, it's good. And it's like we said on Ashley's show last time, we were talking about D&D, even the game master guy who does the narrative, he's a player too. He's got to enjoy the game as well.
Right.
As you go through this. All right. So we have a tradition here on the program, and you guys will see I have a book here that has the last guest leaves a question for the next guest, not knowing who it is. So after we're done with this, you'll be able to give me the question for whoever's next. And I don't even know who that is because it depends on who signs up. Right. So between 2 leagues and possibly a third league, it could be anybody. So the question left for you is, what is the one player or team that has impressed you the most over your 12 years?
Over my 12 years, like just the last 12 years?
Well, I'm just saying, I'm keeping it inside the world of SFL.
Okay. Well, how did someone know how to ask that specifically?
Well, we have to remember we're simulation people, so they're talking about other simulation, sports simulation. So it just happened to fit, because the other question they left for you, if you want to, they actually left 2 questions. I'll give you the choice between 2 of them. The second question is, if you could solve any problem in the world and only one problem, what would it be? And
can answer both.
You're more than welcome to answer both,
because that's a great question.
Yeah, they're both great questions. So,
okay. So the first one, I mean, obviously, the easy answer is Matt Wilson. But we all know Matt, and we all know his story.
Well, understand this goes out to another sim, so they don't know who Matt
All right,
is.
so we'll go with Matt. Okay. And I'll tell the story. I'll tell the early part of the story that most people don't know, that I've only talked about maybe a couple times. So Matt Wilson joined the SFL in season 5, I think, and nobody knew who he was. Right, Mike Daggs was not in the league. Right, so Matt Wilson found the league on his own. Nobody knew who he was. He was drafted by Santa Fe. He replaced the quarterback, actually joined in season 6, because in season 5, Santa Fe, now Mexico City, was in the championship game, and they had a different quarterback. And at the time, there weren't a lot of user players in the league, maybe 20. Okay. So the guy was a generic. He wasn't an actual person. Daniel Garcia, I believe, was his name. So Matt Wilson replaces him. He was drafted by Santa Fe, I think, like the third to last pick in the draft or something like that. Did I say San Jose? I meant Santa Fe anyway. So he gets drafted. He plays his first game. Back in the day, not every game had commentary. So he played his first game. It didn't have any commentary. I don't even remember what happened. But the second game, he played the Carolina Skyhawks. He was down by 13 with about 8 minutes to go. He threw 2 touchdowns in the last 8 minutes, and Santa Fe won the game. And of course, it's this random person, Matt Wilson touchdown, Matt Wilson this, Matt Wilson that, yada, yada, yada. I'm just calling the names on my roster sheet. I don't know who this person is. So the game ends, and I log off, and I start to make dinner with my girlfriend, now wife. And I see that I have a new email, right? New message. So I looked over, and it said, I saw $100, but I didn't know what it was. So I went over, and it said that Matt Wilson donated $100. That was the first time anyone had ever paid me for anything to do this, right? It was a free-to-play league. I had never asked for a donation. I didn't even think that anyone would ever give me any money for it. No idea, right? So he donated $100, and I thought, that is so generous. I don't understand. I legitimately don't understand why he did this. I have to know. So I sent him a message on Facebook, because everything was on Facebook at the time. And I said, hey, I'd really like to talk to you. Do you have a moment? Thank you so much for your donation. And he said, sure. And so I called him, and I said, I don't get it. Why did you do this? And he said, well, this was one of the best moments of my life. I can't walk. I used to be able to walk. I was in I have an operable tumor on my spine. I can't, I used to play football. I wanted to be a football player. I thought the dream was over. And then I showed up here, and it was like I could walk again. It was like my life had, I could do this, that I could actually live out this dream. And then I threw touchdowns, and then I won the game, and you were saying my name, and it felt like I was doing it. I was throwing the football. I was getting touchdowns. It was me out there. And that's the greatest feeling I've ever had. So I just wanted to say thank you for giving me that. I never thought I would ever have it. And then, he won the championship in season 9, our first convention in Dallas in 2018. He got in the Hall of Fame. He was able to go. That's the only convention that he was ever able to make because of health reasons. He got to do his speech. Everyone stands up, chants MVP at the end of his speech. I spelled his name wrong on the graphic because I was still an amateur loser. everything. And he called me out on it because he never let anyone get away with anything. I mean, that was just his personality. But
Right.
he got Mike Daggs into the league. They reunited their friendship because they'd kind of become estranged over time. So they got to call games every week, and they grew closer. And then Matt Wilson and Mike, when we started doing stats, Gerald Smith he loved their calls so much that he wanted to be their statistician. So he statted every one of their games. And then Matt passed away, and then Gerald was so entrenched in, Matt and Mike and he moved from Louisiana to New York so that he could call games with Mike in person, and they could be friends and not a replacement for Matt, obviously, but just a way for everyone to be together. Gerald went to Matt's funeral. I mean, that trio
Right.
became very close, and Matt obviously was a co-owner in Mexico City. He bonded Ramos to the Aztecs. He was a part of that culture and that organization. He was an inspiration for so many people to get involved. And, he was a broadcaster despite only having a little small screen in front of him, despite not really having any ability to, have a bunch of rosters in front of him and have, a bunch of assets. Mike Daggs moved him along as best he could, but he was still, wheelchair bound and had lots of health issues and things. But he still did it, and at a very high level. He did everything. He did everything so well. And it was just like, wow, this guy, this guy's incredible. And before the SFL, he was in his house like me. He was just in his house, just some guy out there in the world that none of us knew about, and there's still millions of people that still don't know about Matt Wilson. They've never heard of him, right? The world is so big, but it's very rare that an individual can make such a profound impact on so many people. And I take inspiration from that. And it's one of the reasons why I still do the SFL, because I remember that night after he sent that donation, after I had that conversation, after I told my girlfriend about it. And I said to her, I think this could be something. And before that moment, I didn't think that. I just was playing around, having a good time, right? Doing the things I did as a child. But he gave me the confidence that, look, this is important somehow. This is valuable somehow. And I never really had the understanding of its value that it could have. And now, obviously, I understand, the tremendous value that it can bring to people. And I love making people, happy and given a sense of purpose. And your new quarterback, Ace Fennick, he inspires me to keep going every day. Ace, I'm sorry, I'm terrible at responding to messages, regardless of the content, especially the good ones. I'm just not good at taking compliments. But man, that guy sends me words of encouragement. He pushes me, like he reminds me that through all of the tickets and through all of the, I have an issue or I don't like this or I have a disagreement, he reminds me that there's a lot of people out there that just love the crap out of this thing and enjoy it. And without that positive encouragement, it would be a lot harder to do this job. But Ace Fennick is, and he was, he had a whole party when he was drafted. He had everybody over and was on camera, and they were all cheering after he got drafted. And those are the moments that, make you say, well, when the hell would you ever get rid of the draft? Right. I mean, it's the best of what the draft has ever had to offer, but it shows the passion in Ace Fennick and people like him. And, so you take that Matt Wilson and you take guys like Ace Fennick and things like that, and they really do push you forward. So, I mean, he's the guy. He's the guy that drives it all. So that's That's how I'd answer that question. The other question is, if I could heal a problem,
If you could solve any problem in the world and only one problem, what would it be and
human
why?
accountability. The lack of accountability is the death of so much in the world. And quite frankly, is the death of so many people's mental state. If you just gave yourself a break and just accepted that you are imperfect and that you failed and that it's okay, we'd be in a much better place. But so many people are afraid of being wrong, of being a failure, of it being their fault and not someone else's, right? You have to take ownership of that. You have to be responsible for that. And people don't want to be rejected. And they fear that if they are accountable and they accept that it was their fault and their failure, that people will turn their back on them and they will be alone. And they don't want that. And so they build up an armor to protect themselves, to survive in a world that constantly rejects people that are different, people that are weird or strange or have a quirk or have a deficiency or, they're constantly looking at people and judging them and looking to blame them because they themselves don't want to take accountability for their actions. And so we become a very defensive culture where we put the blame on someone else and then they put the blame on someone else. And no one wants to accept their accountability in the situation. Like I did earlier today with the draft. I accept our failures in not bringing enough value to the draft to make the teams care more. That's my failure. That is my accountability, right? And I could go on and on with those things, but that is important to self-reflect and say, listen, I screwed up. I'm not perfect. Look, I'm so accountable. I'll tell you, I put a pizza box in the oven last week, put it on the wrong setting, and burned it. Now, every time we need to use our oven, my wife and I have to open up all the windows and doors, turn on all the vents. That was a stupid, idiotic thing to do. And my friends and my wife are never going to let me hear the end of it. But you know what? I screwed up, right? I'm not going to blame anything else but myself. It was a dumb decision. And I'm not going to be ashamed of being dumb and making dumb decisions and allowing myself to be vulnerable is important so that you give yourself a break. Because most of the time we think, well, we don't want other people to criticize us and judge us. But the reality is that most of us spend most of our time being hard on ourselves and judging ourselves and being mean to ourselves and saying, oh, you're so stupid. And why did you do that? And oh, nobody's going to love you and no one's going to accept you. And what are you going to do? And it just puts so much stress on ourselves and it drives us into mental anguish. And then people have emotional breakdowns and then they leave the Discord server. Wait, just calm down. Just turn off your notifications. We'll see you in 5 days. Like, it's going to be okay. You don't have, but that's what happens. If people just, they give themselves so much anguish. Just give yourself a break. It's okay. You can fail.
Well, like you said, failure is not permanent. Success isn't permanent either. And failure is only failure if you don't learn from it. And that's why I used to teach my students, why I raise my boys. And like you said, no, I'm harder on myself than anybody else. My boss, hey, he's doing the job I'm doing now. I've only been doing it 18 months. He's been doing it for 7 years. He's like, well, you got to do this way. And it's like, I'm harder on myself because I'm not doing it to his level, but I don't have his experience yet either. So yeah, I understand that. And it's a hard one. Cameron, I appreciate you taking time. I know I tell people it's a little bit different and everybody's like, hey, no, you should have Cameron on. I didn't tell him it was going to be you today. So they'll be surprised when this actually gets posted tomorrow or Sunday, whatever it is.
Hopefully I
So
didn't bore
I
them.
appreciate you doing this. For those people who don't know me, I'm Wheeler, the GM of the Pittsburgh Riverhogs, which is like all of a sudden became like a meme. It's like when they say my name, they automatically say GM of the Pittsburgh Riverhogs after it. I'm also in different simulations, and so this will be shared on both the SFL and the SimFBA site. So for people who aren't part of the SimFBA, come over and check us out, simfba.com. The guys there, Tuscan and Rocket, everybody uses different names. I'm like one of the few people who actually uses my real name on there. Come over, check it out. Different things, free to play. There's no pressure. It's still developing. It's probably about where you guys were several years ago. We're still kind of in that process where we don't, do broadcasts of games because we don't have a thing to do this. And if you're in Sim FBA, come check out SFL or even UFL. There's a lot of different things you can do to be involved. I always like to expand the reach to people as we can, and we help everybody out by helping each other, I guess, a better way. We're going to get people come over to our side or you come over to your side. Doesn't matter. It's all the same. But I appreciate it, Cameron. And for those who don't like, subscribe, all that other stuff, I don't do that algorithm stuff. I just try to have conversations with people and get to know them. But I appreciate it. Thank you, Cameron.
Keith. It's great show, and much success to SimFBA and everything that everyone has going on out there. We all want everyone to be successful, and we want everyone to be able to organically grow and find their own way and path to do things, because there's so many different ways to do things, and there's so much fun to be had out there. So we need to have a little bit more fun in life.
So how can they get involved with SimFBA or SimFL or UFL? How's the best way for new people?
So with Simulation Football League, it's simfl.net. You can join our Discord community from there. You'll see the button on the homepage. And then with UFL, it's ufl.football. And you can, there's steps and processes into how to claim a player and join our server and get going. So very, very similar, but different. And hope you have some fun if you end up showing up.
Right. Well, I thank everybody for watching. This was a little bit one of the longer ones, but we had a good guest that isn't afraid to talk.
No, never.
Yeah,
Sorry.
which is good. I appreciate it. Once again, this is Behind the Clipboard, part of the Wheels Off podcast. And we were sitting down with Cameron Irvine from the Simulation Football League and UFL. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
And